Well, we're joined now by the Foreign Affairs analyst, not Russian, Tim Marshall, and by Colonel Bob Stewart, a former British Army officer and a Conservative member of the Defence Select Committee. Welcome to both of you. Obviously, this is hugely sensitive and potentially very dangerous because we're talking about two countries that aren't exactly mad about each other, particularly over that border area between Turkey and Syria. But interestingly, the Russians haven't gone so far as to blame anyone yet, and they are saying it's too early to draw conclusions. So is that a note of optimism? Very much so.
I think there are reasons to believe that this will play out over a few days diplomatically. It's going to be a huge diplomatic row. But it is he said, she said. Where was that plane? It was over a border town, Yeğiladaji, which is right on the border. So it is, they're both going to claim the opposites. Crucially, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is in Turkey tomorrow to meet his opposite number. That was already arranged.
Interesting timing, though, isn't it?
But it's quite fortuitous. And all the noises coming out of Moscow suggest they're going to try and deal with this diplomatically. But that's why you need such cool heads at times like this, because if people say and do the wrong things, it is this type of incident that can spark a war. At the moment, the signs are that it won't.
Right. There is now this extraordinary meeting or session of NATO. How do you think that will be handled?
Very carefully. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I agree with exactly what Tim said. It makes the urgency of coordination of the air assets above Syria something that perhaps NATO will be talking about. You've now got Russian jets, you've got coalition jets in the skies, and you've also got Syrian jets flying. So this is very, very important. The implications are we've got to get it together.
Right, and we'll come on to how it might affect David Cameron making his case for airstrikes a little bit later. But let's get back to this border area, because the reports coming out, as I understand it, say that there was already unhappiness because there is a minority, a Turkish minority of Turkmen on that border area. They were feeling pursued by Russian airstrikes themselves because they weren't hitting IS necessarily. They were hitting some of the rebel groups. Is that the background to this?
It's certainly the background. Whether it's directly related that they took the plane down from the ground, that we're going to find out. The Syrian Turkmen, several hundred thousand of them, they are of Turkish origin, but they are Syrian. The part of Syria they live in used to be part of the Ottoman Empire and part of Turkey. They have taken up arms with the Free Syrian Army against the Assad government. They're in the Latakia region, which is the stronghold of the government. And there's been a lot of heavy fighting there. And the Russians have been putting airstrikes in against the Syrian Turkmen. They are absolutely furious about it. And so, of course, they would regard it as in their interest to bring down the Russian plane. Now, if the pilot or both of them are with the Syrian Turkmen, and there's already footage of some Syrian Turkmen advancing up a hill towards trees that have a parachute in it, so it is quite possible they're going to take somebody alive. That's the next question. What will they do with the pilot, and what will the Russians do about that pilot? But that is the background. It is the Syrian Turkmen part of Syria where this has come down.
But the airspace is crowded. It's become more crowded since the Russians intervened. In your mind, how does that affect making any case for British airstrikes in Syria?
Oh, it's potentially damaging, but with the way that this was panning out, Resolution 2249 at UN Security Council, David Cameron due to respond to the Defence Select Committee upon which Bob sits on Thursday. It depends. I agree with what Tim said. It looks at the moment as if Russia is not going to make a big deal of that. Certainly we need Turkey and Russia to be working together, not to be at odds with each other at the moment.
Right, I mean, but what do you think it will do to David Cameron? He's going to make his case on Thursday in response to that Foreign Affairs Select Committee to report. Will this have an impact?
I don't think it will have much of an impact. I think it will have an impact, but the impact will be seen is we've got to actually get real. If this threat from Daesh is such a great deal and such a great threat to our country and the rest of the world. We've now got 2249, Security Council Resolution 2249, that says nations of the world, get real, understand this is a real threat. I'm afraid we're going to have to start thinking about who else we might have to deal with, and that does include President Assad's Syria. And we may well have to deal with Assad and others in that area to deal with such a great threat.
Is that how you see it too? I mean, if we're talking about rules of engagement here, because this will focus minds on exactly those rules and how we would be able to participate if and when that vote happens.
I'm mostly with Colonel Bob, but not entirely. I mean, I think on public opinion and on the wavering opinion in the House, those people that think, I'm not sure we want to get involved in this, it'll concentrate minds about exactly what we're getting into. There is a deconfliction process. The Americans and the Russians talk to each other about how not to crash into each other. The French have been part of that process. The Turks have been part of that process. And if the British get involved, they are also going to have to get involved, probably via NATO, in this deconfliction. Basically, you ring each other up and say, my plane's here, your plane's there, we're going in that direction. Now, did that happen today? Possibly not. It's a very dangerous situation. I'll tell you the other international aspect of it is that the French and the Russians have been getting together increasingingly close, and Hollande is seeing Putin this week for almost a sort of joint military action. That will also complicate the talks. Everybody's got to talk around the same table, and that's where I do agree.
And they've got
Bob.
to talk to the Syrians, because the Syrians are flying.
Because they've got planes up as well. I mean, it's a mess, and it's busy.
It's a big game park.
Well, I mean, just before we go on, Al Jazeera are reporting that both pilots are dead. So come to you for a response to that. If it's looking a mess, is that a mess that Labour MPs are going to want to vote in favour of British airstrikes?
Well, Labour MPs, like MPs across the House, will be looking at what David Cameron's plan is. This is very different to August 2013. And what happened in Paris is obviously a game changer. The UN resolution, I see that as making it very clear that it would be legal to take.
So you would,
I want to know what happens afterwards, because you won't win this from the air. There has to be ground forces going in afterwards. Now, they're not going to be British ground forces or American ground forces. Neither should they. They should be led by Syria. This is where Bob's question comes in. Who's our enemy here? Are we fighting Assad? Are we fighting ISIS? We can't fight them both at the same time.
So do you think Jeremy Corbyn is right to be extremely cautious and probably would not back a proposal for airstrikes in Syria?
Oh, he's right to be extremely cautious. MPs across the House will be extremely cautious. This will not be a kind of parade for Cameron. He's not laid out the ground yet. And maybe he will in response to the Defence Select Committee report, but he's not done it yet.
Just very briefly, response to both pilots being dead. How does that change?
Tragedy. Frankly, they're in a martial profession. In diplomatic terms, it won't make much difference if Putin decides he's going to soft pedal on it.
Let me be brutally frank. If they died as they came down, it actually makes things less complicated. That there's no hostage or prisoner of war situation. If they were killed on the ground, then there will be the Russians might feel they need to make a response.
Thank you both very much.